5, 4, 3, 2, 1. This is Deducter bringing you the final set in Jangbi vs. Fantasy. You can hear the fans going insane in the background there as I am going nearly insane. Last commentary I said something about being rendered speechless. Obviously not literal and figure of speech, because that's how intense this series has been. This is back on the map Pathfinder as in set 1 here, where we saw Fantasy succumb to Jangbi's superior strategic play and interior play, I have to say. And let's see whether Jangbi goes for that again or not. He has done something different every game thus far. He tried to play a mind game last game, but it didn't quite work out for him. It might have still worked out, though, if Fantasy's attack hadn't been quite as successful as it was. And Jangbi had a chance to win even I mean, the game came down to the wire. I would say up until he lost those 2 Dragoons in the suicidal charge against the bunkers, he still had a reasonable shot of winning, probably a 50% chance of winning at that point. Still, that was how intense the series was. I wonder if the game might have been different if Jangbi sent his Dragoons to intercept that floating command center. He could have, at the very minimum, forced a draw. He could have killed the command center or at least damage it. Fantasy will have no choice but either extend his takes out and try to save it. Big risk, because then that opens the way for the Reapers to try to tank, or he'll lose the command center. Either way, could have worked out well for Jangbi, but he opted to assault the fortifications directly, and unfortunately Terran defense is just so strong that it didn't really work out for him. Still, I love the way he placed that pylon. No gateway! 12 Nexus again! Is Jangbi gonna go for the same build? The same build as in game 1! Fantasy! Scout this, please, for the love of God, Fantasy! Or for the love of your OSL Gold Trophy! And there's a very lovely looking Korean woman there. Fantasy, what are you doing? You need to scout this out! Don't fall prey to game 1! Jangbi Mongolian tactics again! Jangbi is scouting. He's been very consistent about that in his entire series. And if he wins here, I would have to give him the advantage in terms of... I mean, I would have to say that a good part of the reason why he's won is probably because of his scout. And now he's scouting in the wrong direction, of course, but he's going to know where Fantasy is. Fantasy is sending out the SCV to scout. Oh, thankfully, he is going to see that there is a 12 Nexus up. He's not going to be completely screwed like last game. Fantasy going to scout in the wrong direction, it looks like. So this thing's not working out quite as well as they need to for him. And he scouted it out early. He has the potential to launch a fast bunker rush. But now he has no choice of doing that. He could still go for a timing attack off 2 factories and try to force the game again. It worked out for him last game on a map with longer distances too. So it could still work out for him here. If he does this, he'll have won 2 OSL straight. Sorry, which is a very rare accomplishment. Only the likes of, I think, Boxer and who else? Boxer and Jadong, I think, are the only people who have won 2 OSL straights. I could be wrong about that, but that's what I remember. Definitely not the other Grace like Uvi or Flash hasn't done that. So yeah, if he does that, he will join the elite ranks, and we can begin to talk about Fantasy in the same breath as his master, Uvi. Perhaps if he can win here, he will have demonstrated that he is indeed a master. Jangbi, though, has been playing so well this series that he deserves to win too. I mean, if they could both be winners, I think they should both be winners. Series, unlike say the last game between Stork and Fantasy, the last series rather, I have to say Stork deserves to lose that based on the way he's playing. He's just played really boring and unimaginative, uninventive StarCraft. Admittedly, Fantasy has been batshit insane this series, but he has played an extremely solid game, so that works out well for him. Regardless, as I was rambling on about the players, what has happened in this game is that Fantasy has spotted the 12 Nexus, but at the same time, Jangbi has actually built some Zealots and 2 Dragoons to put on a bit of early pressure. The thing is, Fantasy hasn't had the opportunity to launch a bunker attack, so what he's going to do is apparently drops with a starport, so Fantasy is going to play a sort of creative clever game. That, I think, could work out very well for him. That's going to be getting picked off, too. So let's see how this sort of vulture drop works out for Fantasy. He is the master of vulture attacks. But perhaps Jangbi has sniffed this out. He's positioned some units in his main base there, 2 Dragoons. So I don't know whether Jangbi has potentially sniffed this out. I think he is worried about some sort of attack, and he's positioned 2 Dragoons there to deal with any sort of incoming drop here. The Dragoon's going to spot the dropship, and Fantasy electing not to unload the vultures there. He might be circling around to go for the natural, but I don't think that's going to work out well for him either. Stargate going down again. We're seeing the same build coming out from Jangbi. He really likes this build on this map. There's a girl praying hard, praying for someone, obviously. Fantasy is going to be able to siege up here outside the natural and stop mining for a while. With his vulture mines, he is actually going to be fairly comfortable in a defensive posture there. Jangbi bring all his units, it seems, to deal with this, but now Fantasy has launched an attack into the main with 2 vultures. Going to pick off a few probes here, doing good damage, I have to say, loading up that tank, and Jangbi perhaps falling apart a bit here. He's attacked the mines, but doing no damage. Those 2 vultures able to take out 4 or 5 probes. Clearly worth it, plus stopping mining for a while there. Causing all sorts of havoc. We see that Corsair not only going to be a useful scout, but is going to be able to pick off that dropship. So the Corsair actually a very good investment in this game. The tanks coming out here to pick off a pylon there at the 6 o'clock position that would block any sort of expansion that Fantasy may potentially set up. The Corsair sees the extra command center, so that is very, very important information here for Jangbi. Jangbi is still, I would say, economically, he's going to the same field he has in Game 1. Let's see whether Fantasy can respond to this. He is upgrading Air Attack 1. I would imagine he's probably finished with range long before this, and that's got to be Air Attack 1. So, Fantasy needs to sniff this out. I think he sniffed it out with the dropship, but he needs to counter it correctly. That's what I mean. Unlike last game where he didn't have the correct troop composition, and Jangbi almost a complete disaster there. This vulture is still coming in to attack. This is what I mean. Fantasy, when he takes the initiative and actually tries to, harass and attack, he is such a better player. He is definitely not playing passive like in Game 1. This is what he needs to do to fight back these carriers. Picking up 2 more probes there at natural in exchange for a vulture. Very, very good trade. This Corsair gonna scout out this attacking force though. I mean, both players playing out of their minds in this 5th game, giving everything they have. I'm so excited that I keep banging my fist on the table. That is how much energy I have, because these games just get me so psyched up here. Massive attack here coming in by Jangbi, but he sacrificed his Zealot at the front to absorb some of these mines. Fantasy has set up a blockade there outside of, well, I guess that's not really outside the natural, that's outside the 3rd base of Fantasy, Jangbi's, although Jangbi hasn't had the chance to set up the 3rd base yet, but it denies the position, I guess. Oh, the other thing you can do here is obviously unload more units into the main 4 vultures. Those vultures, what is Jangbi doing here? He needs to deal with these vultures. He's pulled the probes off very quickly. Okay, now he's brought some units back. There's a Wraith out to fight back the Corsair. 2 tanks coming. The Corsair actually beating the Wraith here. If Fantasy had gotten a 2nd Wraith, things could work out fairly well for him. The carrier is starting to build interceptors here. There are 2 tanks, and they're going to siege up and attack these buildings here, the gateways. Fantasy elevating, bringing units into the main here to compress the attack. He's unloaded more tanks and more vulture here. He's picked off the pylons, so sorry, those gateways can't build, those stargates can't build any more carriers. Once the stargates go down, Fantasy clearly playing much better this game. He should build like another Wraith to fight back these units, or at least get like 2 Goliaths. That's all he needs, or maybe unload some SAVs to start building more missile turrets, because he can't allow those carriers to actually build up the full complement of 8 interceptors like that. That would not be good, since those would be able to pick off things very easily. Fantasy still does not have an armory. Those Dragoons leading a suicidal charge against the tanks. Fancy's defensive position is very strong here. There are a lot of Dragoons on the ground for Jangbi, though. He has not been idle during this time. So, those Dragoons, if they go for an attack of the natural of Fancy's, could be a decisive factor. These tanks desperately need some sort of anti-air. There are only 2 interceptors. And unfortunately for Fantasy, if he had invested in 2 fewer tanks and got the 2 raids, he could have seriously threatened this Air Force. As it stands, he's going to lose all these tanks, even though they've done a lot of damage. I'm not completely sure it was worth it. Jangbi still has a very strong ground army. And Fantasy, again, neglecting his anti-air to his detriment. The thing is now, the carriers have built up quite a few more interceptors. He still doesn't have anything. And look at that tank running all the way over, just getting picked off by the carriers. Fantasy can ill afford these losses here. And Fantasy, why does he not have 2 Goliaths? He had 2 Goliaths for that drop. It would have been, I think, over for Jangbi. Now the carriers have built up all their interceptors, it looks like. Going to be able to pick off the tanks without any trouble here. And the Mongolian tactics working out again for Jangbi. Well, finally Fantasy bring out 1 Goliath, but that's not going to be enough at this point here. Jangbi probably continued to build up his ground army during this time. He's probably not had too much of an opportunity to build many more carriers. He's still down to the 1 gateway, putting down an observatory, and he's got Dragoons down in his main to cover any sort of elevator attempt here. So now, Fantasy responding by getting all sorts of units. Ooh, the flying picking off Dragoon in the main base there. There are a lot of vultures. I think Fantasy would be wise to, if he can engage the carriers, to send the vultures into the natural to launch a massive raid and kill as many probes as he can. Maybe not all the vultures, keep a few in reserve, but send 4 or 5, and that is exactly what Fantasy is doing. Unfortunately, he's not quite able to do too much damage. There are some good defenses, and he didn't send all his vultures. Wow, that's exactly what he needed to do. There are 2 carriers there, but too many missile turrets. The carriers trying to go in and pick off the Wraith, perhaps not able to do that. Just too many missile turrets in that area. Fantasy probably going to try to inch his way up towards the natural. If he can get Siege position there, he will also win this game. Jangbi knows he's in some trouble here. I think Jangbi would be wise to go for an attack on Fantasy's base. Fantasy's invested so many resources there. There are 4 carriers out now. The carriers launching these little harassing attacks, picking off the reinforcements, is exactly what Jangbi needed to do. The mastery there with the carrier tactics, I have to say. Instead of using them to assault a strong position, he uses them in a harassing mode. Unfortunately, Jangbi's economy is cutting half at this point. He's got a strong carrier force and a good number of Dragoons, but he either needs to attack or he needs to get another mining base. Sitting around here like this will only give Fantasy the advantage. The longer this goes on, the more of an advantage Fantasy has. And Jangbi looks like he is going to go for an attack at the main. He's moving out all his ground forces, going to go for attack at Fantasy's natural, rather. Going to pick off this tank. And Fantasy very sloppy with his unit. Why was that tank set all the way up north like that, unescorted? Very, very dangerous. The carriers are going to hold off the attack here at the natural, picking up the 2 tanks. That's all he needs to do. He has 5 carriers now, whereas Jangbi's attack is going to come in at the natural, and Fantasy has nothing to stop this. Jangbi, once again, with his clearly superior strategy. Oh, never mind! Absolute disaster there for Fantasy! He could not have afforded those losses. Now this is going to be GG, I think, for Fantasy. Jangbi proving that he is a champion. Jangbi got to prove that he is a champion, and he deserves this victory. He really does. In this game, he, again, out-strategized Fantasy. I would argue that Fantasy has, and that's got to be Fantasy's mom looking very, very concerned there. Very good, and these carriers are going to pick off all the mobile forces. See, those turrets are invincible to, 2 or 3 carriers, but the ground units are not. If they move out from under cover of the turrets, then they can't do anything. The carriers pick them off, much like the Mongolian horse archers. Jangbi not quite able to attack into the natural, but he's not going to mine. He's reestablished mining. He's going to move his carriers over with the carriers in conjunction with the with the ground forces there, he is going to be able to bust down the natural, I feel. Fantasy has a skeleton crew over there outside the natural of Jangbi's, but and Fantasy's so sloppy, he is really falling apart. He's just stumbling units there, which he cannot afford. Maybe that was the spot? I don't know, he doesn't even have a scanner. The carrier's coming, gonna start picking off the factories, gonna pick off one of the factories, it looks like. Mongolian raid! That is exactly what that, Bisu not looking pleased at all for his teammate. He knows that Fantasy is in desperate trouble. It's not absolutely impossible for Fantasy to win. He still has a lot of defenses inside of his base. He's got enough Goliaths to hold these carriers off for some time, but Jangbi has map control. He's got a strong ground army. He's got a very, very powerful force of carriers. Fantasy somehow managed to stop mining there at the natural again. Very impressive work with just a few skeleton units like that. But well, I guess when those carriers were away, the Fantasy's units can come out to play without much of a problem. And now the carrier's going to start launching an assault here on the turret line. Fantasy does not have anything really to respond to that. The turret's absolutely useless against the Dragoons after the tank has been picked up. And look at this, all these turrets, heavy investment there for Fantasy, completely useless. And Jangbi has countered Fantasy at every turn. He doesn't necessarily have the better micro, although his carrier micro is very good, but he's clear, he has the better unit composition and the better sense of how and when to use them than Fantasy. Fantasy especially, he shouldn't have blundered all those units over without any sort of anti-air during all that time. He knew that carriers were coming. Why didn't he build a few Goliaths? 3 or 4 Goliaths was all he needed. If he unloaded 2 Goliaths with his dropping the main, this would be GG, I feel. The game was in the balance at that point. But with no anti-air, Jangbi was able to build up interceptors on his carriers, polish off that very deadly attack that Fantasy launched into his main, and with that, there's not too much that Fantasy can do at this point. The carriers, in conjunction with the ground army, will destroy Fantasy's forces here. Fantasy getting caught out of position. Things are just completely falling apart here for Fantasy. Ever since he lost that drop into the main, I think his play has just become incredibly sloppy. He's blundering units over the map for Fantasy to pick off. I mean, for Jangbi to pick off. He's not really harassing much anymore, and he's just sort of not playing well at all. There's no other way to describe this. These interceptors unleashed from the carriers, just devastating the buildings inside Fantasy's main, going for a bit of a raid and then coming out to assist the main army when needed. Has the power of carriers. Fantasy still trying to harass a bit here, sneaking 2 vultures into the main. He might be able to do some damage. The carriers not going to worry about the Goliaths, going to finish off the tanks. With that, the Dragoons should be able to come in and polish off the Goliaths without much of a problem. Fantasy doesn't appear to be really trying very hard anymore. He's going to lose all of these units at the front. He still has 2 tanks and a good-sized force of Goliaths to counter these carriers, but I think it's going to be a formality at this point for Jangbi to close out the game. Even if he loses his ground army, he's going to be able to just slowly whittle away at Fantasy's and UV there, not looking pleased at all. Fantasy, still the apprentice, not quite the master, going to be able to pick off one of the carriers. But he can't actually afford these losses right now. He's mining off of 1 base. And I think Jangbi can actually better afford losses, picking off a 2nd carrier. Okay, Jangbi needs to be careful with the carriers here. He's going in for the final attack, and it looks like he is going to prevail. Fantasy desperately trying to build what units he can to hold his off, but the Goliaths just not going to be able to do anything against the Dragoons. This is going to be over here. The Dragoons have position outside of the natural. They're going to be able to pick off the economy here. Fantasy has only 1 chance, which is the fact that he has 2 mining bases. He lifted his command center there to his 3rd base, and he's still mining, but he's going to lose his natural soon, whereas Jangbi still has all sorts of Dragoons on the ground, and he's building more Dragoons. Jangbi does not have another base, though, so he is potentially very low on resources at his natural. I don't think it's going to matter at this point. He still has the carriers at his trump card. Probably shouldn't have lost 2 of them. but he can send the carriers over to raid that base at 3 o'clock, and there's not too much that Fantasy can do in response. I'm sorry, I'm overexcited here. Oh, Santa! Stark is crying! He's overcome with emotion! I'm pretty sure that was Stark! Stark is overcome with emotion! His teammate, finally all grown up, also gonna win himself the medal here, and avenging him! Perhaps most critically, Stark, knows that Jangbi has avenged him in this game! Oh, this is so intense! I fancy bring out all sorts of units to try to save this base, not that it matters at this point, because the command centers already went down. Jangbi still has a reasonable amount of minerals as natural, so he's going to be able to rebuild his interceptors if they get killed, and he's going to be able to build a few dragoons to supplement his forces. The armory might go down here. These carriers are just so incredibly mobile. And I mean, if there is a unit to compare the carrier to, it is the Mongolian horse archer. They dart in, do damage, dart out, and rinse and repeat over and over again. No other unit in StarCraft is quite as effective at that role. The tank getting sniped there, Jangbi playing very well, playing at a very high level still, whereas Fantasy has fallen apart completely. He might have had a chance if he didn't play so poorly and throw away so many units unnecessarily. He might have still had a chance. He is building some raids, perhaps hoping to get Cloak and surprise the carriers. Won't matter though, there is an observer there. Unless he can pull off some... Ooh, the observer getting picked off by the turrets. Unless he can pull off some sort of Boxer-esque Wraith Micro, it's not too much of a chance. There's still a second observer there to protect the carriers. And more carriers are coming out. Here, Jangbi has done the damage that he felt he needed to do, and he is content to just set up another base to start marshalling his forces again. If he can get this third base up more or less unharassed, he should be fine. Fantasy has managed to rebuild his army. He also has that hidden force of Raves, and he is setting up another base. If Fantasy can get himself up another base, and if he can preserve his army, he might actually have a chance still to win. There are 3 observers though, so any sort of cloaked Wraith trick is not going to work at all. So if Fantasy plays perfectly, he still has a chance to win. I have to give a massive advantage to Jangbi at this point though. So it looks like, yeah, both players going to play it safe. Jangbi not electing to press the attack and try to end this. He is getting another base and going to play the safe route here, whereas Fantasy has taken this time, this lull into fighting, to set up his own base there at the 8 o'clock position. Again, Jangbi moving down a force there to flank Fantasy's army. It looks like he is going to sneak some troops over, perhaps to polish off that base again. If he can do that, it will almost certainly be game, but no. Jangbi backing off. What is he doing with his carriers? I felt he could have used his carriers during this time to pick away still at maybe some of the buildings of Jangbi's, even if he can't touch all those Goliaths. So, but now Jangbi's moving out again. He's got 5 carriers again. He needs to be more careful now and not lose 2 carriers like in his earlier song. He's got a large number of dragoons on the ground. Yeah, it looks like he might be going for an attack here. He is going for an attack at the main. I think Fantasy would be wise to try to lure the carrier's aim before committing his units, but Jangbi is not going to be so cavalier with his, and that is what Fantasy is trying to do. He knows he needs to lure the carrier's aim before committing them, but Jangbi is not going to blunder the carriers right into the middle of Fantasy's base. He's just going to do a bit of a harass, pick off a few buildings here and there, mostly missile turrets, and then back out again. Jangbi playing it safe, I think that's wise at this point. He cannot afford to lose 2 or 3 carriers to some sort of sneak attack. Then the game, I have to say, would be more or less even up at that point. Perhaps even advantage to Fantasy. Fantasy's continue to build up all these Raves. I don't think they'll be too effective though. Jangbi, as you can see with these carriers, able to harass and kill buildings at will. Fantasy getting caught out of position here. These dragoons coming in to pick off the base at the 8 o'clock. Jangbi needs to kill this base, but Fantasy bringing his units in the nick of time to save it. Now the carrier is coming. Now is the time to unleash the race. Where are the race? Where are the race? What is Fancy doing? I have no idea where his rapes are. Oh, he's still holding them in reserve, trying to lure the units in. I guess he has no choice but to do that, but these carriers are going to burn down the command center, and it'll be over. I think he would have been better off committed to some sort of attack in conjunction with his raids and Goliaths and tanks. But with that base getting picked off, things are looking very grim. Now is the chance for Fancy to unleash the race. Attack! Samson Round is cheering desperately for Jangbi. Just cheering hard there. Oh, he could have attacked those carriers and picked off 1 or 2 during that time, but Fantasy, paralyzed with the indecision, incapable of making a decisive blow. The SKD1 team members very muted there. They're not waving their little balloons in support of Fantasy here. Fantasy, he needed to commit some sort of decisive action. He cannot allow... Okay, he's going to be able to intercept and pick off that carrier. That is something good work there by Fantasy. I would say actually more of luck than anything, but luck is always important. Now is Fantasy going to commit to an attack? That would... Oh, he's trying to pick off the observers, but I don't think that's going to work. Jangbi has 2 bases, and now Fantasy has no mining at all. He should have committed everything to try to protect that, protect his base there at the 8 o'clock. Because now he's trying to go for the attack, but it won't matter. Jangbi's going to come into his base and pick off everything. Even if Jangbi loses his natural, I don't think he's going to mind too much. The Goliaths are out of position, and the carrier is going to be able to pick off everything here. Once the scanners are killed, that means no more scanning to detect the observers, and it won't matter whether you have cloaked race or not. So this plan does not appear to have worked out. I think what Fantasy should have done is unleash those raids when Jangbi had his carriers inside the main base there. Oh, that's gotta be Fantasy's mom. It could be Jangbi's mom. Just very nervous for whatever reason. Perhaps nervous that her son is about to win the gold medal here at the finals of an OSL and just overcome with emotion. Bisu, they love showing Bisu. He's almost as much of a star as Fantasy. I'm sorry, I'm just cracking up to you, but he's almost as much of a star as Fantasy during this series, considering how many times the Korean commentators panned to Bisu. I think for every shot of Fantasy playing the game, we have a shot of Bisu looking sometimes excited, sometimes surprised, but now very muted and unexpressive. Bisu, perhaps the most expressive of all pro gamers, but what can you do now? These observers getting picked off here by the cloaked race, doing a very good job, but I don't think that that was quite enough. No, it was actually enough. There's another observer coming. Is their scan? The raid's actually working out very well. This was almost Boxer-esque, but now all the raids are going to get picked off. It failed to do the critical amount of damage that he needed to. Oh, Fantasy. Fantasy. He probably ran out of scan. Otherwise, surely he would have spotted that observer floating over. But with his raid force cut down and his ground army, and his raid force destroyed and his ground army cut down, this is going to be GG. Intense and exciting game, but I have to say Fantasy did not play as well as Jangbi this game. GG coming from Fantasy. Jangbi is the new OSL champion, overcoming the curse of his teammates' avenging stork, proving that he in 2011 has made it back in a big way, better than he was at his prime, I have to argue. I mean, obviously with gold he's better than he was. That's, empirical measurement. But also I think his sense of strategy was superior to Fantasy's this game, even though I feel Fantasy had the better micro in general. But he just sort of fell apart that last game, and his decision making wasn't up to the task. Here, 2 Goliaths with that first drop. Who knows how this game could have ended up? Or if Fantasy attacked with the race when Jangbi blundered the carriers into the main base without the Dragoon support, he could have potentially evened up the game. Or if he committed the race to save his base at the 8 o'clock position during the critical battle, he could have potentially won too. But he just, his nerves failed him when it mattered. All credit to Jangbi though, he's getting tossed around by his teammates as he richly deserves. He deserves his victory. I have to admit that was a pretty weak toss. was like 3 inches into the air or something like that. I thought these pro gamers were supposed to work out. But anyway, thank you very much for watching, and the Team Liquid stream has frozen again, but whatever. Again, thank you